Welcome back, everybody, to the Equipment Care, Safety, or Training module for the ORC as we approach this 2022 season. In this video, we'll be tackling some of the topics pertinent to the maintenance and care of our equipment here at the club, what the expectations are of the members and the coaches, and how you can get help if you need it. So did you know that 2 years ago, the average price of a new car in Canada was just over $40,000? By comparison, a brand new 8, if we were to go to Hudson or Empacher, is about $56,000 Canadian. So we're looking at about 20% more than a car. Now, the boats and the blades in the boathouse need to be treated with the utmost care because they are more expensive than a car. So if you would treat your car or your mom and dad's car or your brother or sister's car a certain way, these boats need to be treated even better. Now, why, you might ask? Because there aren't 50 rowing shell repair shops in Ottawa like they are if you get in a fender bender. The average puncture in a rowing hull takes approximately 21 hours of repair work. That is a lot of time. The boat will no longer be available on the water, which can cause a serious ripple effect for all club programs, which means that boats are shuffling from one program to the next, and it can throw everybody off. On top of that, if we can't fix the boat at the club, which is sometimes the case, the boat needs to be sent back to London, which costs a ton of moolah and more time. So not only are we losing that boat for several months as opposed to a couple of weeks, but we're also spending money to ship it both ways and have it professionally repaired. This is not cheap. And all the money that we spend on repairs gets taken away from potential new boat purchases, from things for our truck, our trailer, our ergs, and all the other things that benefit our club members. Now, a couple of years ago, the board of directors for the club was committed the club moving forward to putting aside money each year for equipment purchases. The longevity and the quality of these pieces of equipment depends exclusively on that and the care of our members. So while we are going to get a few new boats every year, yes, best case scenario. If we treat these boats like pieces of crap, they are going to look like pieces of crap very soon. If we treat them with the utmost respect and care, we are going to have a very top-notch, well-performing fleet for a long time to come. Remember that the more care of equipment equals faster boats, which equals free speed, which we all know is a good thing. Picture this. Your neighbor, Jen, has a beautiful vintage Ferrari in the garage or in their driveway. Now, you've got a big important date coming up. You're going to ARL, and your neighbor, Jen, albeit a little bit insane, is kind enough to let you use the car on one very simple condition: do not let anything happen to it. Taking out a boat at the ORC should be exactly the same. You do not own this equipment. It costs a ton of money. And if you break it and don't take ownership of it, then you won't be allowed to use it anymore. Similar to your neighbor, we at the ORC, we like you, but we do not have to love you. There's a mutual respect in our relationship, but every privilege is earned, not given. So please, please, please treat your equipment like the Ferrari every time you take the boat off the rack, and make sure it comes back to our garage in tip-top condition. Next up, tennis balls. If you are rowing a club single, double, or pair, there should be tennis ball covers on every top nut on the boat. These are specifically designed to stop rubbing and scratching of riggers on the hulls below them. And if you row one of these boats, if you're lucky enough to do so, you are responsible for ensuring that a tennis ball is replaced on the top nut before returning that boat to the rack. So if you are in a single, you are putting a tennis ball on top of both top nuts that you're responsible for. If you're in a pair, you and your pair partner are each responsible for one. Pretty straightforward. If the boat that you're approaching doesn't have tennis balls when you arrive, it is your responsibility to find some in the cabinet between bays 1 and 2, or if there are no tennis balls left, you need to put it on the boat repair board. Now, if you do not return your boat to the racks with tennis ball covers on each top nut, this will result in limited rowing abilities moving forward. We do not want to stop people from rowing. In fact, our business is getting people on the water as much as possible. But we do ask that everybody work together to keep our club functional. Little bit of a pro tip: keep the tennis balls with your shoes or with your flip-flops while you row. As long as you know where they are and you know where they're going to be when you get back, it's really easy to snack them back on as soon as you get back to the dock. Next up, putting the boat in the water. Now, it's super important to pay extra attention to the boat's fin when placing it in the water. Now, we need to ensure that as we roll the boat from overheads to waist high, we pause, we stop. There's no momentum, no swinging. We keep that boat at our waist height. We then reach out away from the dock and place the boat down in one simple, slow, coordinated motion with our crewmates. If we are using a boat such as a fluid where the foot plate connects through the carbon gunnels, we need to ensure that there are lock washers on both sides of the hardware and that the wing nuts are absolutely tight. If you get out on the water and you haven't tightened these wing nuts, your footboard will be loose. You could potentially lose hardware and you're going to be rowing home with no feet, which, trust me, is possible, but a heck of a challenge, and you're absolutely going to get dropped by your group. Next up, if your slides rattle while your boat is being carried. So if you've got your boat overhead or on your shoulder and you notice a clanking sound or a tapping sound, the slides underneath your seat are probably loose. You need to go in and tighten them before you row. Otherwise, your slides will shift around. You won't be able to get full compression or full extension, and it's just annoying on top of all that. If the water is rough when you put your boat in, half of the crew can hold the boat away from the dock while the rest retrieve the oars. It is super, super, super important not to let the boat hit the dock as waves roll through. Most of the time, we've got fantastic water here at the ORC. Once in a while, we get a little bit of cross section from wind. Oftentimes, particularly in the evenings, we get people that have rented boats or jet skis, and they can cause some turbulence in front of our dock. It is very important that regardless of what time of day you're putting this boat in the water, you are keeping an eye on the conditions and making sure that the side of your boat, usually carbon or fiberglass, is not smacking up against the aluminum paneling on our dock. Only you can prevent forest fires. Lastly, never leave your boat unattended at the dock. Please ask for help. If you are launching a single, if you're helping somebody else launch their boat, it is incredibly important that your boat never sits unattended at the dock, regardless of how flat it is. Once we are on the water and we are pushing off the dock, do not use the end of your blade to shove off. You can pick your boat, you can ask for help, you can have a coach push you off. We do not want to see the ends of our sweeps or our sculls pushing against the aluminum siding, as that is how we chip the end of the blade and we lose a significant amount of longevity for our carbon oars. Next up, our water bottles should never touch the carbon of the boat. Water bottles, when they come down, must be in a sock or a dry bag and brought onto the water in a boat. You can put them in a backpack, you can put them in anything else, but the hard plastic, which is the top on most water bottles, should never be touching the carbon in the boat, because as it rubs back and forth with each stroke or each gyration of the boat, we're wearing away at the carbon and decreasing the longevity of our shell. If you do collide with anything on the water during practice, it is the responsibility of every member in the crew to inspect the boat post-row and report anything they find to their coach and put it on the whiteboard. If you find something and you tell your coach but do not put it on the whiteboard, your crew can still have their rowing privileges suspended. Keep in mind, this also includes when you bring the boat back, if you were to touch anything when you're on land. This is if you touch one of the racks, if you touch another boat while someone's carrying it, if you drop it onto a stretcher, please take the utmost care. We cannot fix problems we don't know about. And by not reporting them, you are not protecting yourself. You're just limiting everybody else's rowing ability. Lastly, any rower who damages a boat or does not report a damaged boat can be subject to suspension of rowing privileges or work hours in terms of boat repair or projects around the club, as there'll be a penalty assigned by either the program coach, the head coach, or the VP competitive for the ORC. After practice, if anything, a nut, washer, or any other hardware has come loose or is rolling around inside your hull, you are responsible for putting it back on before returning the boat to the rack. No boat should be put away with any sort of residue from the river, any bubbles, water scum, etc. It needs to be rinsed or wiped off before the boat is returned to the rack. All boats, once they're back on the rack, needs to be wiped down with a towel so they can be returned to the rack clean and dry. There are always going to be towels between bays 1 and 2 and between bays 3 and 4 up front. We need to remember that we are returning our boat, aka our Ferrari, back in a better condition than that in which we found it. If you see some of the older white shells in our boathouse, namely the Cashburrs and older Hudsons, you'll see that they've almost browned just above the water line. This is from water residue being left on them or river scum being left on them and not being wiped down time and time again. If we do make that extra effort just to wipe down our boats will be in considerably better condition in a couple of years' time. Moving forward to oars. Our oars need to be placed with the scoop, so that concave portion of our blade facing up when they're on the ground. That way, if they do get stepped on accidentally, it does not crack the blade and render that $1,000 pair of oars completely useless. Also, please keep in mind that the blade of our oar should never be placed on the concrete. If you are doing oar work, you can do so on the dock or on the grass, but we are not doing oar work on the concrete where the paint or the oar itself can get scratched up. On the dock, all oars must be placed on the designated oar dock. So these are the oars that are not on the outward facing side of the water, but rather they are closest to the ramps in the big boathouse. If you're rowing a single, please ask a coach or a teammate to hold your boat while you retrieve your blades if you cannot carry them both at the same time. And once you're done rowing, make sure you put your oars back on the rack or hang them up on the oar rack outside the boathouses. Very simple and straightforward for ergs. So after every use, ergs, sliders, rollers, and handles get sprayed and wiped down to ensure the cleanliness and longevity of our club fleet. If you haven't looked before, the white rollers underneath your erg seats are just hard plastic. And if we don't clean off the scum and the residue on our actual slide, it eats away at that plastic and creates a bumpy ride very quickly. If you do go to use an erg at any point during your time at the club and it isn't working for some reason, please make a note on the whiteboard or put a sticky on the head coach's desk with the erg number that's stenciled on white or stenciled in white on the side. Lastly, please respect and care for all the equipment. It will single-handedly make the biggest difference in the quality of boats the ORC has to offer its rowers. With a set dollar amount every year for repairs and purchases, the less issues that we have repairing our old equipment, the more money we have to get spent on new boats and new exciting things for our members. If there's an issue, say something early. Most problems only get bigger and the longer they get neglected, and the less we know about it, the less we can fix it, which means that a small hole becomes a bigger, bigger hole. For those of you that drive, it's similar to a crack on a windshield. Now, Saturdays this year, now that we are not limited to number of people on site, we are going to be doing boat cleanup. Regardless of your program, whatever your weekend row is, whether it's Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, you are asked to please put your boat on stretchers after your row, give it a rinse down with the hose and some soapy water, and wipe it off before putting it away. This will, again, increase the longevity of our shell. If we take care of our equipment, it will take care of us. Lastly, keep yourselves and your crewmates accountable.